The house had been silent for 6 months. Not peaceful. Silence and peace aren't the same thing. This was the heavy silence of grief, of empty rooms that used to hold someone, of spaces that remember their occupants long after they're gone. My mother died in February, leaving me with a mortgage I couldn't afford and 100 years of house that creaked and settled like it was trying to speak. I needed a tenant. The thought made me sick. A stranger living in my mother's house, sleeping in the room where she used to read by the window, walking the hallways she'd walked for 40 years. But Morgan was no help. My sibling had moved across the country years ago, visited once for the funeral, then disappeared back into their own life with a spouse and children and the kind of normalcy that felt impossible to me now. Just rent it out, Morgan had said over the phone, their voice tinny with distance. It's practical. Mom would understand. But would she? Mom had been particular about her space, about who entered it, about what the house witnessed. Still, necessity isn't interested in sentiment. The listing went up on Tuesday. By Friday, I had one response. Iris arrived on a gray afternoon that matched the house's mood. She was in her 40s, I guessed, though something about her made age feel irrelevant. She wore simple clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweater, and carried only 2 small suitcases despite requesting a long-term lease. "Thank you for seeing me," she said as I opened the door. Her voice was soft, careful, like someone who'd learned to speak quietly in loud spaces. I showed her through the first floor, living room with its worn couch, kitchen with its ancient appliances, bathroom that needed updating. She nodded at appropriate moments, asked standard questions about utilities and lease terms. Normal, unremarkable. Then we went upstairs. The spare room was at the end of the hall, small but bright, with a window overlooking the garden my mother had stopped maintaining in her final year. Iris walked the perimeter slowly, and then she did something that made my skin prickle. She pressed both palms flat against the wall, closed her eyes, tilted her head like she was listening to music only she could hear. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "The walls are very old," she said without opening her eyes. "They hold things." I laughed nervously. "Just plaster and wood. The house was built in the 1920s, so it's seen better days." "No." She opened her eyes, and there was something in her expression, sadness, recognition, that I couldn't place. "They remember. That's why I chose this house." The listing felt full. I should have said no right then. Should have thanked her politely and moved on to the next applicant. But there was no next applicant, and she was offering 3 months rent up front, in cash, which I desperately needed. "When can you move in?" I heard myself ask. She moved in that evening. I was in the kitchen making tea when I first heard her. Not footsteps or the sound of unpacking. Just her voice, steady, conversational, like she was on the phone. But when I climbed the stairs to check if she needed anything, I found her kneeling against the wall that separated her room from my mother's bedroom. The bedroom I'd kept locked since February. The bedroom that still smelled like her lavender soap and old books. "Are you okay?" I asked from the doorway. Iris didn't turn around. She's very loud in this spot. Insistent. She has something to say about the garden. My mouth went dry. "Who? Your mother?" The walls absorbed her voice over decades. "I'm just listening to what was recorded." I backed into the hallway, my heart hammering. Iris was clearly unwell, hearing voices, talking to walls. But she'd paid 3 months up front. As long as she didn't damage anything, as long as she kept to herself, I could tolerate some eccentricity. That's what I told myself as I went back downstairs. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my room, the same room I'd had as a child, never moved out of even after college, even after Mom got sick, and I heard Iris through the ceiling. Still talking. That same steady, one-sided conversation continuing past midnight. I put in earbuds, played music, tried to drown out the sound of a stranger speaking to my mother's walls. Eventually, exhaustion won. I dreamed of my mother's voice calling to me, not from her bedroom or the hospital where she'd died, from inside the walls themselves. Muffled but distinct, saying something about the garden and what was buried and you need to know. When I woke, gray dawn was filtering through my curtains. I went downstairs to make coffee and found fresh soil scattered across the back porch. Dark, rich soil that looked like it had been recently dug. I checked the garden. Undisturbed. Nothing had been planted or uprooted. The soil shouldn't be there. Movement caught my eye. I looked up to see Iris standing at her window, looking down at the garden with an expression of profound sadness. She didn't wave. Didn't acknowledge me. Just stood there, watching, as if the overgrown garden held answers to questions I hadn't thought to ask. I cleaned up the soil, threw it in the trash, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But the house had been silent for 6 months. Now it was starting to speak. Over the next week, Iris's routine became apparent. She woke early, moved quietly through the house, spent most of her day pressed against various walls, listening, always listening. She carried a small notebook and would occasionally scribble in it, her handwriting cramped and urgent. I tried to ignore her, tried to focus on my own work. I did remote data entry, the kind of mind-numbing job that paid the bills but left no impression on the world. But I kept finding myself drawn to wherever Iris was, watching her strange ritual, trying to understand what she heard in the settling of old wood and plaster. On the 5th day, my curiosity won. "What are you writing?" I asked, finding her in the hallway outside my mother's room. She looked up, unsurprised by my presence. "Fragments. What the walls remember." "Can I see?" She hesitated, then held out the notebook. The pages were filled with incomplete sentences, snippets of conversation with no context. "Never forgive myself for what I did. Buried where no one would look. Morgan can never know." My hands started shaking. "That's my mother's voice." "How did you?" "I didn't create it. The walls did." Iris took back the notebook, her expression clinical. "Houses are acoustically complex. Over decades, they absorb vibrations, conversations, arguments, confessions. The plaster, the wood, the very structure of a building can hold sound impressions. Most people hear nothing, but I've always been able to hear what walls remember. That's not possible, isn't it? You've lived here your whole life. Have you never felt like the house was listening? Never caught a whisper of something that sounded like memory?" I had. God help me, I had. After Mom died, there were moments when I swore I heard her voice, faint echoes that seemed to come from inside the walls. I'd attributed it to grief, to my mind creating comfort where there was none. "What is my mother saying?" I asked quietly. "She's confessing. Over and over, in different rooms, different times. The kitchen wall holds her voice from 15 years ago. I had no choice. They would have taken everything. The hallway, from maybe 10 years ago. The garden keeps secrets better than people. And the wall in her bedroom." Iris paused. "From just before she died. Cameron deserves the truth, but the truth will destroy them." Hearing my name in that list made something twist in my stomach. This is insane. Is it? Or have you just never learned to listen? Iris stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "The walls are trying to tell you something. About your mother. About what she did. About what's in the garden. There's nothing in the garden. Then why does every wall in this house whisper about burial?" I walked away before she could say more, went to my room, and tried to pretend I hadn't heard the conviction in her voice. Tried to pretend I didn't believe her. But that night, I did what Iris had done. I went to my mother's bedroom, the room I'd kept locked, preserved like a museum, and I pressed my ear against the wall. At first, nothing. Just the ambient sound of an old house, the heating system's hum, distant traffic, my own breathing. Then, so faint I thought I was imagining it, I heard her. My mother. Her voice coming from inside the wall itself. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I had no choice." I jerked away, my heart racing. This wasn't possible. Sound didn't work like this. Walls didn't record voices like tape. But I'd heard it. Undeniably. My mother's voice, preserved in plaster and wood, speaking words I'd never heard her say aloud. I found Iris in the kitchen, making tea as if it was perfectly normal to live in a house that kept secrets in its structure. What did my mother do? I demanded. I don't know the full story yet. The walls only give fragments. To understand, I need to listen systematically, room by room, wall by wall, piecing together decades. She poured hot water into 2 cups. "But I think it has something to do with your father. My father died when I was 3. Car accident." "Are you certain?" She handed me a cup. "Because the walls near the garden whisper about a car accident. But they also whisper about someone buried. And those might be related." The tea burned my tongue, but I barely felt it. "You're saying my mother killed my father." "I'm saying the walls recorded something traumatic. Something involving death, burial, and decades of guilt." She met my eyes. What exactly that something was, that's what we need to discover. I wanted to throw her out. Wanted to revoke the lease, return her money, restore my house to its grieving silence. But another part of me, The part that had heard my mother's voice in the walls, needed to know. How do we find out? I asked. We keep listening. The house wants to tell its story. We just need to give it time. But time was something I was running out of. Because that night, I heard another voice in the walls. Not my mother's. Deeper. Male. Saying words I couldn't quite make out. But the tone was clear. Fear, pain, pleading. A voice I didn't recognize, coming from walls that had been silent for decades. My father's voice, begging for help that never came. I couldn't stop thinking about my father. Thomas. That was his name. I'd seen photos. Tall, dark-haired, smiling in that way people smile when they think they have forever. The photos stopped when I was 3. After that, only pictures of mom with 2 small children, no father present. Morgan remembered him better. They were 7 when he died. But when I called to ask about him, Morgan got defensive. Why are you digging this up now? Did you ever think there was something strange about his death? I asked. He died in a car accident. It was tragic. Mom grieved. We moved on. What's strange about that? Do you remember the funeral? A long pause. Closed casket. Mom said the accident was bad. Morgan's voice tightened. Cameron, what's going on? You sound paranoid. I explained about Iris, about the voices in the walls, about fragments of confession. Morgan's response was immediate and harsh. You let a mentally ill woman move into mom's house, and now she's convinced you the walls talk? This is grief. You're not processing mom's death properly. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was projecting meaning onto random sounds, creating mysteries to avoid facing the simple, painful truth. My mother was gone, and I was alone in a house too big for one person. But that night, Iris came to my door at 2 a.m. You need to hear this, she said. The bathroom wall upstairs. The acoustics are perfect there. It's where your mother felt safe to speak without being overheard. We went upstairs together. Iris pressed her ear to the tile behind the toilet, then gestured for me to do the same. The surface was cold against my skin. At first, nothing. Then, like a radio finding its frequency, my mother's voice emerged. He's not breathing. Oh God, he's not breathing. What do I do? I didn't mean. It was an accident. He grabbed me, and I pushed, and he fell, and... A long silence. Then, calmer, colder. No one can know. If they investigate, they'll find everything. The money he took. What he was doing. They'll take the children. I have to protect the children. I have to protect Cameron and Morgan. I pulled away, gasping. That's not. She didn't. The walls don't lie, Iris said softly. Your mother confessed to this spot for decades, processing what happened, talking through her guilt. She killed him. The words felt foreign in my mouth. She killed my father and buried him somewhere and lied about it for 35 years. In self-defense, it sounds like. And to protect you from something. Iris touched the wall gently. What was your father involved in? What would the investigators have found? I didn't know. Had never known. My mother refused to discuss him, said the grief was too much. Even Morgan remembered almost nothing about him beyond vague impressions. The garden, I said suddenly. All the fragments mention the garden. She buried him there. She buried my father in the garden. The next morning, despite the absurdity of it, despite Morgan's protests over the phone, I began digging. The garden was large, overgrown with weeds and wild growth. I focused on the oldest section, where a gnarled oak tree grew, where my mother used to sit for hours in her final months. 3 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. Not bone, not a body. A metal box, sealed with wax against water and decay. I pried it open with shaking hands. Inside, documents. Bank statements showing withdrawals of thousands, tens of thousands. Letters addressed to Thomas, threatening legal action for fraud. Newspaper clippings about embezzlement investigations. And at the bottom, a death certificate. Thomas's death certificate, dated 3 weeks after the car accident that supposedly killed him. I sat in the dirt, staring at the papers, understanding dawning like a sick sunrise. My mother had staged the car accident to stop the investigation, faked his death, made everyone believe he'd died, bought time. And then, 3 weeks later, he'd actually died. At home, with only my mother present. Morgan arrived that afternoon, the first time they'd been back since the funeral. They read through the documents in silence, face growing pale. She kept him here, Morgan whispered. After the fake accident, kept him in the house, hidden, while everyone thought he was dead. And then something went wrong. I finished. Iris appeared at the garden's edge. She'd been silent all day, giving us space. Now she spoke. There's one more wall. Your mother's bedroom. The confession from the night before she died. Would you like to hear it? I didn't want to, but I needed to. We went inside, to the room that still smelled like lavender, and Iris pressed her ear against the wall behind the bed. This is different, she said. This isn't confession. This is instruction. She's talking directly to you, Cameron. She knew you'd hear this eventually. That's impossible. Just listen. I pressed my ear to the wall, and my mother's voice filled my head, clear, deliberate, as if she was standing beside me. Cameron, if you're hearing this, then Iris found you. Good. I hired her 6 months before I died. I couldn't tell you directly, too much cowardice. But you deserve the truth. Your father was not a good man. He stole from people who trusted him. When the investigation came, he became violent. The night of the accident, he was planning to take you and Morgan and run. I had to choose. I pushed him. He fell, hit his head. It was an accident. But also, it wasn't. In that moment, I chose. I chose you over him. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know, everything I did because I love you. The voice faded. I stood there, trembling, trying to process 35 years of lies rearranging into a story of protection and sacrifice. She hired you, I said to Iris. My mother hired you to tell me this after she died. Yes. 6 months before the end, she found me, asked if I could translate what the walls had recorded. I agreed to tell you the truth, all of it. There's more, isn't there? I could see it in her face. Something else she recorded. Iris nodded slowly. One final confession. From the day before she died. But she made me promise not to share it unless you asked. It changes everything. Tell me. Once you know, you can't unknow. Tell me. Iris returned to the wall, listened, then spoke what she heard. The cancer will kill me soon. That's fine. But there's something I never told anyone. Thomas didn't die when I pushed him. He was unconscious, bleeding, but alive. I had hours to call for help, hours to save him. But I looked at him lying there, and I made a choice. I let him die, watched him bleed over the course of the night. When he woke once, confused, asking for help, I said nothing. It wasn't self-defense. It was murder, calculated, deliberate, and I'd do it again. The silence that followed felt like the world ending. My mother hadn't accidentally killed to protect us. She'd murdered in cold calculation, and I would never be able to ask her why. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. Morgan fled immediately, couldn't stand to be in the space that held such terrible knowledge. But I stayed, moving through rooms like a ghost, trying to reconcile the mother I'd known with the woman who deliberately let someone bleed to death. Iris continued her work, methodically documenting what the walls held. She showed me her notebook, page after page of fragments, not just from my mother, but from throughout the house's history. Previous owners, previous secrets. The house had witnessed 100 years of human experience and recorded all of it. Why do you do this? I asked one evening, finding her in the living room with her ear pressed to the wall. Because I can't not do it, she said simply. I've always heard what walls remember. Walking into old buildings, I'm bombarded with decades of sound. It's overwhelming, maddening. But if I translate it, give it meaning, it becomes bearable. My mother paid you. She paid me nothing. She offered me purpose. Help her children understand, and I could quiet one house's voices. Make them coherent instead of chaos. Are we done? Have you heard everything? Almost. One wall left. The foundation in the basement. The oldest part of the house. Whatever it recorded will be from the beginning. We went down together into the musty darkness. The basement was all stone walls and earthen floor, the kind of space that felt like it belonged underground. Iris approached the foundation wall, massive stones mortared together a century ago. She pressed her hands against it, closed her eyes, and her expression changed from concentration to confusion to something like horror. What? I asked. It's not your mother's voice. It's older, much older, and it's not a confession. What is it? A contract. A woman's voice, speaking to the house itself. Making a bargain. What kind of bargain? Iris's eyes opened. The house would keep her secrets, absorb them, hold them, never let them surface while she lived. In exchange, after her death, the house would find someone who could hear. An interpreter. Someone who would make sure the truth was known. I felt cold despite the basement's closeness. My mother made that bargain. No, this recording is over 100 years old. The house's first owner, maybe. But your mother discovered it, learned what the house could do, and she made the same bargain. The house would keep her secret while she lived, then find an interpreter after. You, me. But here's what troubles me. The original bargain requires the interpreter to choose. Once all secrets are revealed, I decide what happens to them, whether they're exposed fully or buried again. What happens if they're exposed? The house releases them. Anyone who enters will hear what the walls have recorded. Your mother's murder, Thomas's death, everything. And if they're buried, they stay locked in the walls. Only people like me will ever hear them. I understood the choice I was being offered. Destroy my mother's memory by exposing her murder, or keep the secret and preserve the version of her that the world had known. Why do I decide? I asked. Because you live here now. The house is yours. The secrets are yours. Iris touched the stone wall gently. What you do with them defines who you are. I thought about my mother, about Thomas, about how stories change depending on which truths are told and which are kept, about whether justice for a man 35 years dead mattered more than the life I still had to live. If I expose this, what happens? Investigation, excavation, forensics. Your mother's reputation destroyed. Your family's reputation destroyed. Thomas's body found and properly buried. And if I keep it buried, life continues. The secret dies with your mother. Thomas stays in the garden. Only you and I ever know. I sat with that weight for hours. Morgan called, asked what I'd decided. Whatever you choose, I support, they said, though their voice suggested otherwise. Finally, I made my decision. I'll keep it buried. Not to protect Mom's reputation, but because exposing it serves no one. Thomas is dead. Mom is dead. All we do is inflict pain on the living. Iris nodded. I understand. Are you okay with this? You translated everything. Does it feel wrong to bury it again? The walls don't judge. They just hold. I'm the same way. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, and the house began to speak. Not whispers, not fragments. Full voice, loud and clear, coming from every wall simultaneously. My mother's confession. I watched him die. I chose to let him die. Thomas's voice. Please, help me. I don't want to die. Other voices, older, confessing crimes and betrayals I'd never heard. The house was screaming its secrets. I found Iris in the hallway, looking shaken. The house is angry, she said. It made a bargain. Secrets for revelation. You're trying to break that bargain. How do I stop it? You can't. Not by hiding. The bargain requires resolution. Either the secrets are fully revealed, made public, investigated, or they're given proper burial. Acknowledgement. What does that mean? Come with me. Iris led me to the garden, dawn breaking gray over the overgrown space. The house behind us continued its cacophony, walls vibrating with voices that had been silent for decades. Thomas has been buried in secret for 35 years, Iris said. That's not respectful burial, it's disposal. The house wants him acknowledged, mourned, given the dignity his death deserves. He was a criminal, an abuser. Everyone deserves burial. That's not about his worthiness, it's about yours. About whether you can separate acknowledging death from judging the life that preceded it. I stood over the spot where I'd found the metal box. Somewhere beneath, Thomas's bones rested in earth that had been hiding them since before I had memory. If I do this, if I properly acknowledge him, will the house quiet? Yes. The contract will be fulfilled. Secrets brought to light, even if only to you. The dead given their due. I began to dig, not to move him, but to create something that marked his presence. Morgan arrived mid-morning. I called them, and surprisingly, they came. Together, we worked through the day, creating a small memorial space. We placed a stone. We planted flowers that would bloom in spring. On the stone, we carved a simple inscription. Thomas, husband, father, remembered. No dates, no details, just acknowledgement that he had existed, that he had died, that someone marked his passing. As we placed the final flower, the voices from the house began to fade, not disappearing entirely, but quieting to their previous whisper. The house, satisfied that its bargain was complete, released its death grip on sound. Iris watched from the porch. It's done. The house has accepted this compromise. The secrets remain in the walls, but they're at peace. What happens to you now? I asked. I move on. Find another house, another set of secrets to translate. She picked up her 2 small suitcases. This is what I do. What I've always done. Wait. The first woman, The one who made the original bargain. Who is she? Iris smiled sadly. I don't know, but I think every house has its original bargain. Every building absorbs what it witnesses. Most people just can't hear. She left that afternoon. Morgan stayed until evening, and we stood together in the now quiet house. Do you hate her? Morgan asked. Mom, I don't know. I understand her better, maybe. Understand how impossible choices create impossible legacies. What will you do now? Live here. Keep the house. Honor both of them by living honestly with what I know. Morgan left, promising to visit more often. I was alone again in the house, but it felt different now. Less oppressive, as if acknowledging what it held had given it permission to rest. I went to bed that night believing the worst was over. I was wrong. 3 months passed. The house settled into new rhythms. I went back to work, started therapy, began the slow process of rebuilding a life that wasn't defined by grief and secrets. But I was hearing things, not just in my house, everywhere. At the office, I'd press my hand against the wall and hear fragments of conversation from years past, arguments between previous employees, confessions whispered in empty rooms. At the store, the walls murmured about theft and affairs and small betrayals. The ability Iris had, the curse of hearing what walls remembered, had transferred to me. Or perhaps it had always been there, dormant, waiting for the right trauma to wake it. I tried to ignore it, filled my days with noise, wore headphones constantly, avoided touching walls. But the voices were getting louder, more insistent. Buildings were no longer just structures. They were archives of human experience, all trying to speak at once. I called Iris. She answered on the third ring. It's happening to you, she said before I could speak. I wondered if it would. How do I make it stop? You don't. You learn to live with it. Or you learn to translate it. A pause. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was contagious. Or maybe I did, and I didn't warn you properly. Is this what you live with? Every day? Every building? Yes. It's why I keep moving. A house becomes overwhelming after too long. The voices layer, accumulate, until I can't think through them. I don't want this. I know. But you have it now. The question is, what will you do with it? After we hung up, I sat in my mother's bedroom, the room I'd finally started using, making it my own, and I listened to the walls. Not fighting it this time, just listening. My mother's voice was still there, faint but present. You'll do what I couldn't. You'll listen. You'll translate. You'll give the dead their voice. Had she known? Had she chosen me specifically, knowing this ability might transfer? Had the whole thing been orchestrated not just to reveal her secrets, but to pass on the burden of hearing? I didn't have answers, but I had a choice. Reject this ability and spend my life fighting the voices, or embrace it and find purpose in translation. That evening, someone knocked on my door. A young couple, looking to view the newly posted room for rent. I showed them through the house, explained the history, the edited version, discussed terms. As we stood in the upstairs hallway, the woman touched the wall absently. This house feels full, she said. Like it has stories. All houses do, I replied. Most people just don't listen. After they left, I went to the window and looked at Thomas's memorial in the garden. Beyond it, the city stretched out, thousands of buildings, millions of walls, countless secrets recorded and waiting. I was becoming what Iris was, a translator, an interpreter of acoustic memory. The question was, would I run from it, or would I learn to use it? The couple moved in 2 weeks later. Their names were Sam and Alice, and they were blissfully ordinary. Young professionals, no interest in the house's history, too busy with their own lives to notice anything strange. They didn't hear the walls, but I did. Every day, more clearly. Not just my house, but every building I entered. The grocery store walls whispered about shoplifters and heartbreak. The library held decades of whispered secrets between shelves. Even new buildings, barely a year old, already contained fragments of the lives lived within them. I started documenting what I heard. Following Iris's example, I carried a notebook and wrote down fragments. At first, it was just a way to manage the overwhelming input, get the voices out of my head and onto paper. But then I started seeing patterns, recurring themes, universal human experiences recorded in walls across the city. I began to understand why Iris did what she did. It wasn't just about translating individual secrets. It was about recognizing that every space we inhabit holds our humanity, our joy, our pain, our mistakes, our love. Buildings are witnesses to everything we are, and someone needs to listen to what they've witnessed. One evening, 6 months after Iris left, I received a letter from her. No return address, just a postmark from somewhere far away. Cameron, I hope you're learning to hear without being overwhelmed. I wanted to apologize and explain. Your mother didn't just hire me to reveal her secrets. She hired me to pass on the ability. She'd discovered she had it in her final months. That's how she knew the house had recorded everything. She couldn't bear to let it die with her, couldn't stand the thought of all those recorded voices going unheard forever. She chose you because you're strong enough to carry this burden. And because, like me, like her, you understand that some truths need to be spoken, even if only to walls. The ability will grow. You'll hear more, translate more, understand more. Eventually, you'll have to decide, will you use it just to listen, or will you use it to help others the way I helped you? Either way, you're a keeper now. A keeper of what walls remember. It's a heavy burden, but also a gift. Someone has to hear. Someone has to translate. Someone has to make sure that what's recorded isn't lost. That someone is you now. With respect, Iris. I set the letter down and looked around my mother's house, my house now. Sam and Alice's voices drifted from upstairs, normal conversation about dinner and work. Living voices, adding to what the walls would remember. I touched the wall beside me and listened. My mother's voice was still there, fainter now, but present. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for not letting me disappear into silence. Thank you for being brave enough to listen. I closed my eyes and let the voices wash over me, not fighting them anymore, not trying to silence or ignore them, just listening, translating, understanding. Because Iris was right. Someone has to remember. Someone has to hear what buildings witness, what walls record, what spaces absorb of the human experience. And that someone, for better or worse, was me. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and groans. But now I understood, it wasn't just settling. It was speaking, telling its story, adding my story to all the stories it had held for 100 years. And I was finally, truly listening. Outside, evening fell over the garden where Thomas rested, where my mother had lived with her secret for 35 years, where truth had finally been spoken, even if only to walls. I would keep this house, keep listening, keep translating, because in the end, we're all just voices trying to be heard, trying to leave some trace that we existed, that we mattered, that our stories, however painful or shameful or complicated, deserve to be remembered. And the walls, patient and porous, hold everything we give them, waiting for someone brave enough to listen.